Hi, welcome everybody. Here's the latest episode of the Cybernaut Club, and here we meet Julian Pearson. And Julian is he's an IT expert, or would you class yourself as an IT expert, networking expert? Or?
I wouldn't say an expert,
but also
no.
even more
IT professional.
Yeah, a hacking professional.
IT professional, not hacking.
Oh right, yeah, IT professional. Julian's an IT professional, and also even sort of more interesting than that, Julian is also a farmer, a cow farmer specifically, right? Would you say that? Bovine farmer?
Yes. So I always wanted a farm as a kid. When I went on holiday with my parents to a place that was right next door to a dairy farm, which made a profit from 9 cows, and most of the effort was done by hand with a 3-legged stool. Unfortunately, I was born 10 years too late, because when I was wanting to have the farm, they'd all gone. But if I tried 10 years earlier, they could hardly give them away. And the European Union was paying a fortune towards everyone that bought a farm. They had 30% of the mortgage. And then with the wine lakes and the milk ponds and the butter mountains, they were able to pay those mortgages off very quickly. Not for me, unfortunately. I had to earn my ill-gotten gains as an IT professional in order to accrue the funds to buy a very small farm and pick up my passion for raising cows, specifically beef cattle. I don't have the time to do dairy because that's a commitment to milking twice a day and doing something with the milk. No one's going to turn up for 20 pints of milk with the numbers that I've got. It'll be more, just too complicated. Beef's easier.
And you could you'd have to make like cheese or something with it, and then you need a storage place and a processing area for the cheese.
Yeah, and loads of boxes to tick and officials to please and fees to pay, and it just too much hassle.
You have to pasteurize it and stuff like that as well, and it's
unless you're making what's the stuff that for Parmigiano
Reggiano,
yes, because that's using unpasteurized milk.
That is my favorite cheese. That is it's so tasty.
Okay, you've got the Parmesan region in Italy, but if you go down to the heel of Italy in Puglia and stuff like that, and you can go to the open air markets, you can buy a whole wheel of their equivalent of Parmesan for like 40 euros.
That's amazing.
You can't get a chunk in this country for 40 euros. Yes, I like to eat my way around the world. As you can see, it's sort of affecting my face.
You're a man after my own heart. Yeah.
After your own heart attack, I should think.
Yeah, heart attack. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it can happen. But I tend to stay away from the carbs. I try and stay on the straight and narrow and only really eat meat. Controversially, like I'm trying this carnivore diet and the keto diet, and I'm in and out of it, and it's working really, really well. I'm having
the reason behind that, why it works.
Well, what the sort of experts say is that if you deprive your system of carbohydrates, you deplete glucose, you stop your body from constantly raising insulin levels beyond what is sort of normal, and then if you have 75% fat consumption, 25% protein or thereabouts, you're burning more fat. You're using the body is turning the fat cells that you consume and the fat that you store in your abdominal region into a type of protein called a ketone, and the ketones are used by your brain, and they're used by the rest of your body when you're out of glucose. So you can very quickly use the fat in the diet, and then it starts working to remove the fat from your system that you've got stored. And if you have say what would be classed as a balanced meal that has a certain amount of carbs and a certain amount of fat and protein, your body will work to work to use the carbohydrates first, because it's easier for it to process it into
Converts
glucose.
it from starches into sugars. Yes. The other thing is that proteins, high protein diets sate your appetite faster.
Yeah.
So you won't feel as hungry if you've got a higher protein percentage than you would do with carbohydrates.
Yeah, and the fat as well is also really filling. Like you can have,
and delicious.
Yeah. The fat is where the flavor is, as we said. Yeah, so we've got a sort of a selection of different things that we're going to talk about today, and I'll just run through the list that we took yesterday. So we're going to have a talk about the calves and like raising calves, and you mentioned previously about how you name your generations of calves and how they adapted to you, and then training your bull to be ridden. Your walking,
everyone wants to know that one.
Yeah, your walking license for your bull. We touched upon milking a little bit, but there was like a backstory of your journey, your introduction into milking, how to prepare a bull for riding, how to influence them, what sort of treats and sweeties they might like, and then also your broken leg as well, which was astounding.
It's just a scrape.
Yeah, it is but a scratch.
Yes. Come back here, I'm going to chew your kneecap off. That's lost on the younger generation, of course. Okay, do you want to hit the first one first?
Yeah, so calves. Yeah, calves.
Calves, yes. Well, I like to calve in spring, early spring, while the cattle are in the barn, because I've got closed circuit television in the barn and I can monitor them without having to get up in all weathers every 2 hours during the calving season, 24 hours a day, to go down to the barn to check if there's a problem. This way I can work in my office. I can have there's a screen just over there that you can't see here, which monitors the CCTV in the barn and elsewhere. And I can see very quickly if there's a birth about to happen, not just because you can see things happening at the back end, but because of the behavior of the animals, whether it be the cattle or next month it'll be sheep. But the advantage of getting them in the spring, early spring, is that when I turn them out, then mums are on fresh, lush grass. They'll produce very rich milk. The calves will rapidly grow, and they should be weaned in the 6 months that I'm expecting them to be weaned. And at that point, you can separate them off from their mothers if they're being sold. The girls quite often go to, if they meet the conformity, they can go for breeding elsewhere, not at 6 months, but people like to pay less and then bring them on themselves. I'd get 3 times the price if I kept them for 2 years. But that's still a lot of investment in feed and care, consumption of a very limited amount of grass, which is what triggered the EDP article, which in turn triggered your invite to come on the podcast. Yeah. Which a quick update on that is that last night I received a phone call offering me 30 acres. So wow. I've actually put a stop to the sale of some of the animals in order to conserve my breeding stock. The only ones that had gone was something called a cull cow. So she despite some veterinary intervention, she'd remained barren. And one of the oldest ones I've got with a young calf that is pedigree registered also went, but again, it's the low cost end, so people want to buy low cost and then develop their own. Everyone always thinks that they deserve top dollar for their animals, but they only want to pay the lowest possible price, like below cull price, for any animals they buy in. Of course, you pay peanuts, you get the wrong things. That's completely the wrong analogy, but never mind.
Yeah, you expect a cow, but you get a monkey.
Yeah, you pay scrap prices, you'll get scrap.
Yeah.
So yes, so raising the calves, it's important for me when they're born, and I do miss out on at least half of them, so I have to make up for it in the hours of daylight that follow, is for when the mum is giving birth, I want to be there. Apart from sharing that experience of a new life coming into the world, that to me is half a dozen every year, it's also the opportunity for me to bond with that calf, because during those initial hours, Mum is, apart from the excitement where she bellows to the world, look what this has just come out of my back end.
Yeah. What the bloody hell's this?
And I mean, they're born at around about 40 kilos in weight. So these are big babies. And while the calf hasn't got up to its feet yet, she's licking it frantically. And if I'm fast enough, I can get in there and I literally spoon with the calf. So I get the birth fluids are on my clothes. Mum will then lick me. She rebonds with me, and we've had a bonding since she was a calf. And the mother will start to low. Now, people hear the hymn about the cattle are lowing and stuff around Christmas time, but very few people understand what that is. It's not a moo. The mooing, everyone knows what a moo sounds like, but a lowing from a mother, and it does change tone. Each cow has a different low, and each calf has a slightly different low than the one that she gave before. So it's almost like they're naming it.
Right.
I say that because it's just my own observations. It could be completely wrong, but that's what I put in my head. And so I have a voice or I have a noise that I make roughly equivalent to a low, which is, to give you an example, it's almost like trying to force something out. When the mother does it, it's a beautiful sound. When I do it, it's a bit like grating glass. It's horrible. But as far as the calf's concerned, it's got a safe environment. Mum's there. It's being cleaned. It's not being harmed, and it's hearing Mum give a low sound, and it's hearing me give a low sound. And in the following days, I'll continue to use that lowing sound to reinforce the bond that I have when I handle that calf. So it hears my low, it remembers safety, it doesn't run away. Its instinct, of course, is to run away. It doesn't know human form, it just knows cow form. So if I give a low, oh no, that's okay, I remember that, that's safe. And I try and stay with the calf as long as possible until I'm exhausted, because invariably they try and give birth in the middle of the night. I've got a day job to earn money for, and I can't really be out there too long. One of the things I have done in the past, there are several signs about a cow giving birth, some of which, if anyone's listening to this around dinner time, they may want to block their ears. But at the back end, we have something I nicknamed the short snot, which is a discharge. It's like a translucent lubricant, and it's only gets to about 6 inches or 15 centimeters for the modern generation in length, and it's extremely slippery, and it's like a pre-lube, and that happens about a week or so before the birth, and you'll notice what appears to be the tail, the tailbone lifting up is actually the pelvis around the hips dropping down as the pelvis expands, ready to allow the calf through. It's a sort of a optical illusion. It looks like the tail's going up, but it's not. It's everything else dropping down. And then there's the long snot, which goes a meter long, and it means that she's producing this lubricant in excess amounts because the birth is within a few hours. At this time, she will have been bagging up for a couple of weeks, and the teats will feel or appear to be as firm as chubby fingers, but just before, within literally a couple of hours before, she will go into overdrive. A lot of them, every cow's slightly different, but with most of mine, they'll go into overdrive, and their teats will become almost triangular. They will get so full of milk.
Wow.
And I have one called Lightning, whose teeth got so big the calf couldn't fit one in her mouth. So I had to milk that one off by hand, keep saving the colostrum, and then that can go in the freezer to preserve it in case I need it in an emergency. But then it meant that having given it a few squeezes, the calf was then able to fit this teat into its mouth. And by the following morning, it's like watching a dehydrated toy that you plonk into water, grow your own dinosaur. They come out skinny because obviously they've only got a narrow passage to come out of. And they just stuff their faces full of milk and the colostrum, and they inflate. And by the time I come and see them in the morning, they're running around. They've got on their feet, and they've been fluffed up, and they're full. They're like two different animals.
That's so beautiful. I can picture all of that in my mind very easily as you describe it. It's it must be so rewarding to be there with them and to be part of that process. Yeah. I've seen quite a few episodes of All Creatures Great and Small growing up, so and I used to live next door to a farm in the west of Ireland when I was a kid, and there was the farmer there. He was a dairy farmer, and he had some pigs as well. So yeah, I spent some time as a child, not meant to, but going through his fields, like on adventures, and getting shouted at by him. But yeah, I'd come across the cows, and I'd have to make sure that I was keeping out of their way, because they can be quite dangerous, can't they, if you don't know how to handle them, or if you don't know what to do. Like if you go into a field full of cows, you could accidentally get trampled or something.
Yes, but if I was giving advice to anybody, first of all, never go into a field with cows if you've got a dog.
Oh yeah.
I don't even take my dog in with the cows. Well, I do on occasions, but it's when I'm there, he'll come to me, he'll lie down next to me, next to the calf. But even then, the mums give him a nudge with their nose. They're familiar with him. Imagine a strange dog; they will literally trample that dog to death, and anything that's attached to it, which includes the human.
Yeah.
So the thing to do, if you're on your own and you've got cows chasing you, is turn around and go boo. Because they're not expecting somebody to challenge them. They will stop dead. I had exactly the same thing happen to me 20 years ago. I was showing my wife where I'd had this sort of Swallows and Amazons holidays in North Devon. And we were going through the farmer's field. We obviously spoke to the farmer and said, you remember me, this little snotty 9-year-old that was here? And he was, yes, we remember you. And I asked him if I could walk around to show around the farm and the fields and where I used to tickle trout in the stream. And we were coming back across the fields, and there was been about a dozen young cows. When I say young, they were still about 18 months old, and they came at full charge together behind us. So I just turned around and boo! They stop suddenly, and then you can just carry on walking. If they carry on chasing you, you just boo again. But it's the safest way out is up, if you can. But there's not too many places to go up. And I wouldn't try and climb a fence because they normally contain about 11,000 volts. Which can be a bit painful.
I've made that mistake as well as a kid. I remember my younger brother was like, go on, just touch that fence, and I was like, what? And I grabbed the fence, so we were going to go over the fence into the field, and I remember feeling like I got punched in the back, and I turned around and I was like, there's nobody there, like. And then stupidly held on again, and then got it again, and then it dawned on me the second time. I was like, "Oh bloody hell, electric fence!" Yeah,
it's a painful experience that puts people off as much as it puts the cattle off.
Yeah. Do you think they're do you think like cows are like intelligent animals? Would you rate them as like the way some people, they rate dogs and pigs and things as having intelligence and being quite clever? Where would you put like a cow, like in that sort of thing? Would you say they're an emotional animal?
Oh, definitely. Yesterday morning, Damson, Bethlehem Star, and Bethlehem Star's calf Quasar left us to the person that had bought them. Today, the bull was calling for them. He was missing Damson. He was always being close to Damson. Dan was always the last one onto the livestock trailer, and he would wait for her. He would hang around with her and be the last but one to go onto the livestock trailer with her if we were moving between fields. Unfortunately, I don't have any contiguous fields, so every time I move my cows, I have to load them up onto a livestock trailer, 2 or 3 or 4 at a time, and move them to the new one and offload them, which is fine if it's only half a mile down the road, but if it's 4 miles down the road, it's one heck of a round trip.
Yeah.
So it's I would say they are intelligent to a point. It's unfortunate because you need to define intelligence.
Yeah,
I don't think that they're going to sit there with their hooves and work out an escape plan. What they will do is they will any cow will go around a new field and will check it for weaknesses, and they will challenge that to see whether or not they can get out. And once they realize that the fence is complete, they'll settle down. When you bring the next load in, they'll chase around and say, look, we've had a run around already. We can just eat grass. It's good. No one's here trying to kill us. But that sort of approach.
Is that what they're looking for? Do you think they're looking to feel secure, or are they looking for a way to escape when they do that?
They're looking to feel secure.
Yeah.
If they wanted to escape, they would be trying to get out. They push the hurdles over when I'm creating a channel for them to get onto the livestock trailer. They've not infrequently get out of the barn and they shout, look at me, I got out. And they'll wander around and make a lot of noise. They'll go and explore. At the moment you open the gate and put a bit of feed back in the trough, they're back in that barn. They're just there for a bit of adventure and to check things. I don't think they don't try and escape per se.
Yeah, so they're curious animals. Then,
yeah, very curious. Yeah, which is why when I started trying to befriend the first bull that I befriended and took beyond sensibility was a bull called Harry, and I'd found him in the field. He was a newborn. He'd been abandoned by mum in a blazing hot day, right in the sun, and mum had gone off to the shade of a tree. He was very near death, and it took me 3 days of tube feeding him, which of course is extremely risky. You have to put the tube down, listen to make sure you haven't put the tube into their lungs, and then pour in 2 liters of milk. It happened on a Sunday, and I went around and bought virtually every blue top bottle of milk I could find, and poured it down his throat, and then managed to return him 3 days later. But he remembered that care. That 3 days was a bond between him and myself, and that allowed me throughout the time that he was with me to develop this friendship where I didn't need to halter train him. I literally, by the time he was, I don't know, 3 or 4 months old, I put a halter on him and he just accepted it. And like, what do you want to do? Oh, you want me to come over there? And we'd go over there. And then as he grew older and I thought, well, maybe he could support me, I started climbing onto him when he was feeding. They're strong when all 4 legs are down. You have to wait a little while, about 2.5 years old, before they'll take you for a proper ride. And it just developed naturally.
Would he be the first bull that you trained, or that?
He was the first bull that I trained, yes. And I went whole hog and put a saddle on him. I just remembered there was a bull I tried it with before called Jesus, born on Christmas Day 2012. My mother was spending the Christmas Day with me for the first time in 30 odd years. And I went, oh, we've got a calving. And but that turned out badly. He didn't like the saddle at all. He'd let me sit on him, but he didn't like the saddle at all. And then he failed the pedigree, so he ended up in the freezer. So, but then Harry came along, and I started from scratch. That was a perfect opportunity, and eventually I couldn't hold Harry back into the herd any longer, because otherwise he would have been serving his own daughters. So he was sold on, and subsequently, unfortunately, that buyer didn't sell him on, but sent him to the food chain, which was not upsetting, but disappointing. A lot of effort was completely wasted because they didn't ride him either. But anyway, with regards to the question about the intelligence, they are intelligent enough to build relationships, not only with humans, but between themselves. There's a steer that I have. I call him Normsky. He's one I've decided to retain as something I can ride and develop beyond the level that I could do with an intact bull, because obviously they have to change hands to avoid serving their daughters. And I can't have two bulls because they'd be fighting, but also it just makes accommodation a bit more complex. But a steer isn't a threat to the bull, isn't a threat to the girls with regards to getting them served. And Normsky will stay with me for years. And we will develop that bond further and further and further. In fact, if there's if the video I've taken is clipped into this, there's a short piece, unfortunately with my back to camera rather than my front, where Normsky comes along and he lifts me up. He sticks his head between my legs from behind and then lifts me high enough for me to slide down his neck and onto his back. And then he'll just stay there because he gets he swings his head round because what he's expecting is a sweet reward. And which he gets, but he also gets a back rub, and he adores me. If I lie on the straw, he'll lick my head, which can make it quite sore, because if you know what a cat's tongue's like, just imagine that much bigger and much rougher and much stronger. And it's like a rasp. But yes, they will build their bond between the cows as well. So Normsky will not do anything with me if the bull is within 5 meters. Because he knows that the bull will get jealous, because the bull has a friendship with me, and will push him out of the way. So he respects the bull. The bull had that relationship with Damson. I've got a cow called Hyacinth, who's my favorite cow, but don't tell the rest. She was at the bottom of the sales list. There's a cow called Hyacinth, but she's not for sale at any price.
Wait, is she named after Mrs. Bouquet?
No. I believe it was the next door neighbour's daughter had just had a child or something like that. And the request came through, oh, you're on H's, can we call it Hyacinth? So I said, yeah, that's fine. But Hyacinth likes to rub her head, scent mark me. She'll find where I'm standing, and she'll just come up so quietly, and she'll rub her head up and down on my leg, so as if she's scratching her ear. And then she knows she'll get a cuddle and a back rub. And she's yet to calve this year. She was late served last year, and she's not even bagging up yet. So she'll probably give birth in the field, which is fine. She's an experienced mother. So there shouldn't be any risk with her.
And with Normsky, is he the bull that you've been able to take him for a walk?
No. That was, I could do it, but that would be naughty without the right certificate. The original cow that I took for a walk was a calf called Oreo.
Oreo.
Belted Galloways are black at both ends and white in the middle, just like an Oreo biscuit. The Americans called them the Oreo cows. And as I was on O's that year, this year we're on Q, so it was only a couple of years ago, we named him Oreo. And his mother had a very difficult time and was rejecting him. So we milked the colostrum off her, which she allowed us to do, and we could hold her in a halter and Oreo would have his fill. This was after a few days. I think she was just a bit tender after everything. And then I thought, I'd like to take him for a walk with the dog, which we did on a couple of occasions while I put this application in for a walking license. Now, walking licenses are normally only issued for sheep, goats, pigs, and smaller animals that basically you can jump on and wrestle to the ground reasonably easily. Well, There's no bit on the form for cattle, but there is a big space. So being in IT, I won't promote a particular application, but there was a PDF editor that I could use, and I identified the font that was in use on the form, and I recreated an exact replica of what it said for sheep and goats. I duplicated that, backspaced out of the word goat, and put cattle. So the size, everything was identical, as if it was part of the original form. I completed everything as I needed to, had it been a sheep, a goat, or a pig, which is basically you have to define routes that you want to take around the fields. Obviously, I spoke with the farmers concerned first to get their consent, but you then have to identify where there is other livestock belonging on other farms, and you have to ensure that the route you have does not go to anywhere where they can go nose to nose through a hedge and risk a breath transmitted disease.
Yeah.
So I showed the route, I showed where everyone else has got animals, and it got passed. Unfortunately, the couple of days before the license arrived, I went into the barn to find that the young calf was dead. This is not uncommon with bottle-fed calves. Although he was getting some from his mother, it wasn't a regular supply, so we had to bottle feed him. And I can't remember the exact term of it, it's clostridius or something like that, or clostridiosis. It's a bacterial infection that kills very, very quickly. If you don't pick it up within a few hours, the calf will die, which is the case. So obviously, at night time, I've gone and done a check on the cameras at about 11 p.m. You see a little calf down there. It's all curled up, sleeping. And you think that's great. By the following morning, if he'd already been showing symptoms which weren't going to be apparent anyway, I mean, if he was doing that in the middle of the daytime, not getting up when I approached him, that would have been suspicious. But at night time, you expect, like any child, they're tired. And by the morning, he was dead, which was very sad.
Yeah. Yeah, that is really sad, and unexpected and unavoidable as well.
Indeed, but I am going to be applying for that was the first cow or cattle walking license ever issued in Britain, and so I'm hoping to have the second one, because they did limit that one until, because it was going to be a bull calf as opposed to a steer. They did limit it for a single year. So now that Normski's already nearly 3 years old, that would be irrelevant, and I would need to demonstrate that he was to hand and in a halter and perfectly manageable, and they might allow me to do it. I understand if they don't. Pity if they refused, because even the farmers say, "Oh, that would be good to see you taking it for a walk with the dog."
How far do you think you could travel on a bull? Like, say if you were, sat on it, are they as strong as a horse? Like, or would it hurt?
Oh, far stronger than a horse.
Stronger than a horse.
It won't hurt them. Yeah, far stronger than a horse. Put it this way: a horse of the equivalent size to a bull will probably weigh 500 kilos, if that, maybe 450. A bull's going to weigh 850, and most of that is pure muscle.
Yeah.
The legs are far stronger, but and like a horse, those hooves, whereas a cow's hooves are cloven and a horse's aren't, it still consists of the equivalent of you or I walking around on our, which way for camera this one, on those two fingers. So that, like the which would be on your toes, but the one next to your big toe, I suppose, are the second and the middle one, and the one towards the big toe, and it's your index finger and your middle finger on your hand are the equivalent, and they go running. Now, a bull can run, but with that amount of weight, it's not going to run far, because it's a heck of a lot of energy to move that amount of meat. A horse would be much faster. But a bull could plod along quite happily all day.
I can imagine that this is it's almost like a ready-made script for a film. To have a chap like yourself, riding a bull into town, stopping off at the local pub and having a beer, and
That would be nice, yes.
that'd be amazing.
In America, there are some farms that specialize in taking people for rides on cows, and they use longhorn cattle. Nothing like the English longhorn, the American longhorn. They're enormous. Like they're wider than the Highlands horns, but they steer them by tying ropes either side of a nose ring. So I'm not into nose rings. I know that some people, some societies, breed societies, and shows insist that all bulls are fitted with a surgically attached or surgically bolted in, as it were, nose ring. So a hole is like a hole punch for paper. It's punched through the septum, special little device, and then a pure copper ring is put through, and then that's the bit that's hinged is then closed and then locked with a little grub screw, which is then snipped off. So it's a permanent fixture. But there are some perfectly acceptable spring-loaded pinch rings. So it literally looks, I keep on getting my fingers the wrong way. It literally looks like that. It's when it's open, and when the spring is released, it goes to a very close gap, which just touches the septum either side, and it's all the rest of the flesh in the front of the nose that then is still sensitive, but allows you to control the animal without having to surgically cause it pain. I've had to have them inserted for some people. No one really likes to do it because everyone thinks, well, I don't want him to think I did it. So, and it's a veterinary procedure, so it's not cheap. But yeah, it's if it was down to me, bulls like the ones I raise would not be fitted with a nose ring that was surgically put in. The clamp one would suffice as a reminder. Like in shows, they insist that you have a nose ring and a halter, and the nose ring's really there in case, because the halter's nothing to a bull. They could drag you for miles with the halter on. The nose ring is there in case the bull gets out of hand. So it doesn't need to go through the nose, it just needs to clamp onto it.
They're magnificent beasts. I remember when I was a kid, the farms near where I used to live, the bulls that were in those fields were like blonde in color, really big. So I don't know what kind of breed that was.
Blonde yellow, blonde white.
Yeah, like blonde white. Yeah.
Could be a Charolais. They're quite big.
Yeah,
fairly short-haired.
Really massive shoulders. I remember, like great big thing, like scary. Like you didn't even want to dare try and go anywhere near that field because that bull was coming at you.
Yeah.
I remember that when I was a kid. We'd all be like, go on, yeah, you go in there, and we dare each other, and none of us were brave enough to go in.
No, they pick up on that. Any animal can sense fear, and they will use it as a lever against you.
Yeah.
So where the mothers have challenged me, especially when they were my foundation herd, the thing to do is to stand your ground and make sure that they don't intimidate you away, because once they've learned they can do it, they will persistently do it in ever more petty scenarios. So it might be that you're taking too long to do a bale of hay, where you're trying to cut the netting off a big bale of hay, and they might start saying, well, if I do this to him, then he'll hurry up. Well, no, the idea is that I go in, and if they nudge me, I just completely ignore them. I'll take my glasses off if they're at risk, because I can't afford to replace glasses all the time. But I'll stand my ground, and I'm used to getting the odd bruise. No system is perfect, but they've not tried to trample me yet.
Yeah, although there was the one occasion.
Well, it wasn't so much a trample. You inferred previously, I train through reward, and whether that be a massage, but my favorite reward, which they pop them in your pocket, they're really something called a U roll. You can get cattle rolls, but you can't give cattle rolls to sheep but you can give sheep rolls to cows. It's all because copper kills sheep. So
Yeah.
I have these sheep rolls for our ovine stock, and I pop a handful in my pocket, and then when they've done something well, whether they've picked me up or they've given me a ride or they've not walked off when I'm grooming them, I will reach into my pocket and I will feed them one of these things. Now, they're about the size of my thumb. So they're designed so that if you don't have a trough in the field, they don't get lost in the grass. So you can pour a bag of these in a long line and every one of them will get eaten.
Yeah.
If you do that with ordinary feed, it's tiny. It's like the lead out of a pencil.
Yeah.
In fact, it's called pencil feed. And an awful lot of that will go to waste because it gets down deep in the roots of the grass. So we use rolls rather than pencil feed for the sheep. But it has a double purpose because then I can use it with the cows. And whenever I've got visitors, whether they be the locals coming for a cow cuddle, who are it's sort of a by arrangement, then I get half a bucket of those out, tell them to stuff their pockets, and the cows know that visitors equals sweeties.
Yeah.
So they have to stay on the feeder, on the safe side of the feeder rail, and these cows are sticking their heads through, and you can put your whole hand full of sweeties. You can put your whole hand inside a cow's mouth. It will not bite you. It knows the difference between vegetable and meat, and they don't want to eat you. They want to eat the sweeties.
Yeah.
So you can get very covered in slimy saliva, but it's quite safe, and lots of people giggle, and children especially like to do it, but they tend to drop an awful lot of them on the floor.
Yeah.
So yes, so what happened was, in this particular instance, I was showing off to my niece, Georgia, who was with us, along with several other family members, for some lambing. The cattle were out on the field, and I went to show her Harry, that one that I'd bottle fed and tube fed for 3 days. And I nipped under Harry to show off that he was so calm he wasn't going to go bolting. But unfortunately, Harry also had this, visitor equals sweeties. So he took a couple of steps towards my niece to see whether she had sweets. And unfortunately, the first step landed on the back of my left leg, snapping my fibula. At the time, I didn't realize it was broken. I thought I'd torn a muscle. And it was a clean break, a proper snap, not a hairline fracture. So I hobbled back, having given the bull a cuddle to tell him it wasn't his fault, it was my own stupidity. I hobbled back to the farmhouse. Everyone went, "Oh, come on, we'll take you to hospital." "No, it's only a sprain. Don't worry about it. I'll walk it off." And indeed, for 12 days, I was doing various things. I travelled in a car down to London from Norfolk for an interview with the Ministry of Justice for a contract, an IT contract. And I'd said to them, could you phone them up? "Could you please make the interview room wheelchair accessible?" "You never told us you were in a wheelchair." "Well, I wasn't on Friday."
Yeah.
Had a bit of an
change.
accident, so things change. Yes. "You're a contractor, aren't you?" "Yes. If you're PAYE, you'd have been on a month's holiday straight away." But yeah, 12 days later, it wasn't getting any better. I'd been stone picking in the field, sort of hobbling along, thinking I'm exercising that sprain out, go through the pain,
Yeah.
and collecting all these stones from a recently resurfaced field. And I thought, I'll phone NHS 111 or whatever it's. I can't really remember what the number is. And they
Yeah, I
went,
think that's right.
we've made you have an appointment with your doctor. He's got to see you within 6 hours. So we phone him up when he opens and tell him you phoned us and you've got to have an appointment. So I did, and at 10 to 9 managed to get an appointment, but it's a 7-mile trip. So I literally got told the wife, "Darling, go on, we got to go. Got an appointment in 10 minutes." So off we went. Well, I walked into the doctor's surgery, and he got me to climb up on the bench. And he took one look at it. He said, "You idiot, go to hospital. You've broken your leg." So we spent a bit of time at the hospital. And then my wife normally goes, obviously with COVID, it's not been possible, but normally goes away for a week, normally to Spain with 3 friends of hers. And they all forget that they're grandmothers, wives and mothers for a week, and they can relax and do their thing, read books and catch the sun. And I suddenly realized, well, hang on a tick. I'm not going to be able to drive down to check the livestock down a mile and a half away with my leg in plaster, and I'm not going to be able to wander through the mud with my leg in plaster. Can't get my foot in a welly with my leg in plaster. So I got my standing knife out and just cut it all off. So it had only been in plaster about 2 weeks tops, and it was supposed to be in there for 6 weeks. And but it was fine. It's healed okay. I still get the odd sore bit, but I think that's just a lump of bone. But yes, it was an accidental breakage caused by my own stupidity, rather than the animal deciding to deliberately trample on me. It was just sweet.
Yeah, it's so. How did you go from sort of training them to move around to riding them?
I don't know, really. Just deciding to stay put when they went for a walk. For me, it's more difficult because when I go and deal with the cows, it's normally between 6 and 7 o'clock in the morning, because I've got to be finished. I've got to do whatever else I do after, because they'll always bellow in the barn for their food. It doesn't matter when it is. They think, oh, Dad's here, it's feed time. So and I do sympathise with my near neighbours. I do have 3 near neighbours. And so I try to avoid them bellowing too early. So the first thing I do, I always prepare their next meal so I can grab the bucket, put it in the troughs, and they're happy. I can then go and do poo picking or whatever else I need to do while they've got their noses in the trough. So when I've done what I need to do and I've got cow time, as I call it, everybody else is still asleep. So there's no one there to put the halter on. Well, I can put the halter on, but there's no one there to lead the animal around with me on its back. So unfortunately what happens is I tend to have a fairly immovable experience on the bull, unless they decide they're just going to amble along, in which case I stay put. Sometimes that catches them by surprise, but they'll just go slowly, and it's more of a plod than a walk. And but when I've got visitors, it's a different kettle of fish, because then I can put the halter on. The visitor can get on with Normski, because I only do that with Normski. I don't think many people will get on the bull like I do. It is a decision that, or a level of trust that you need to build over time. It's not something you can do with, oh, hi, bull. Some people, they will do. They'll jump on his back and give him a back rub, and he'll stay there, chin hits the floor, and he'll welcome the attention. But Normski, I put him in a halter. Someone gets on his back. There is a weight limit that I make sure that by eye that they're well under that. If they weigh less than I do, then it's okay. And then we go for a walk. We'll go around the feeder rail, around the hurdles, all over the straw. And I do say to them, if you fall off, it's fine in the barn, because there's a good 6 or 7 inches of soft straw mixed in with some very soft poo. So you'll smell a bit, but you won't break a bone. And they go backwards and forwards, and occasionally then I need to keep an eye open for Normski's relationships with there's another one called Oliver, who also lets people on his back. He doesn't go walkabout though, but he likes to have head-to-head pushing challenges. I won't say fights, because they're not fights. They just like to play, and they like to play. He likes to take advantage of a disadvantage. So if someone's on Normski's back, then Oliver will think, ha, that's an easy win for me. I get in there. So I then have to separate the two of them whilst the person is dismounting safely, and then remove the halter and let the boys get on with their playtime. I'll always let them do what they need to do. They need to actively want to participate with humans. I won't force anything. I'll indicate that I'm happy to interact. So with the bull, that would be climb the hurdle, stick one leg out, and he knows, oh, right. So he'll come over and he'll position himself underneath me and stay put. As
we saw in the video, it looked, like it looked so automatic. Like you just got there, put your leg out, he came over. It looks so easy.
Well, it is easy.
Yeah.
And that which brings us on to the subject of how to train your bull. as opposed to your
Yeah.
dragon. And I'd love a dragon, I really would.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's not many of them around.
No.
Um, uh, so with the bull, what was it? So yes, I've filmed for you again. I've filmed another instance of that. I had to cut a lot. You know, when they say you never work with children and animals, well, he was just looking at me and going, yeah. And
Yeah.
of course, as I said, I'm not going to force him to do it. So I had to wait a little while. And he was, shall we say, distracted by a young lady because there was a cow bulling in the barn. So it would be a case of I've got to look more interesting than she does, which is hard to do when you're not a cow.
Yeah.
So eventually I stick my leg out and he comes along and he sits underneath me, or sorry, stands underneath me, and I just lower myself down. I give him a shoulder rub, a few pats, gives him a sort of a scrubbly thing like you do your grandchildren, sort of like scrubble their hair. Then I lie down on his back and I put my arms as far around him as I can and scratch the sides of his belly, because I won't even go halfway round, let alone the all way round. And then I'll sit side saddle on him. I'll turn around 180 degrees. He does like, I've got this a multiple nippled rubber brush, which sounds positively
we spoke about that, didn't I? I need to get one for my wife.
Let's not go there. It's just a personal matters, personal details. But no, that saves my fingertips, because I mean, they're thick old hide. If you imagine your belt, if you've got a full hide thickness belt, it's several millimeters thick, a good possibly 8 millimeters in places, and that's some rough old hair. So it can abrade the fingertips if you're doing it day in and day out. So I've got this rubber thing, and the hair just falls out of it afterwards, which is really good as well. But they love it because they can get all the scratches that they can't reach themselves, all get itched. But he likes it, especially around the top of his tail. So I literally turn 180 degrees and I'm scrubbing his backside or his rump, I should say, with this rubber hand brush, which is not a brush, massager.
So you mentioned the rump, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday, about the type of cows that you have, and how the fat is distributed in the meat as well. That's quite interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so, and I'd like to qualify something which didn't come over very well yesterday when we were just having a dry run for this. Not having done one of these before, I just wanted to check a few things. I once did an after-dinner speech before we got to that. I once did an after-dinner speech at my old boys' school. I went to a standard comprehensive that had been a grammar school in Maidenhead called Desborough Comprehensive. I don't know what it's called these days, but I was asked if I would do the after-dinner speech. Okay, and I sent a written version of it to the secretary, who I thought would have died 20 years ago. He just keeps on going on. And I'm 60, and I think he was an old man when I was at school. So I thought you must be due his telegram soon. But anyway, but he was, oh, this is brilliant. He said, it's fantastic. The trouble is, after dinner, and it was a roast beef dinner, the subject to have better not be how to take a semen sample from a bull with a 24-volt anal vibrator, because it puts people off what they just eat. Yeah, but anyway, yes. So I was so bad at delivering that, and I had a handoff with the head boy. Was waiting for a particular phrase in my speech as a handover to him to do the next speech. So I couldn't just abandon it. I had to go through the whole thing, and I was so bad I heckled myself. And I promised never to do another one again. So when you ask,
you mentioned that device. Do you sell samples to other farms?
No, I don't. You're thinking of artificial insemination. There is a whole load of strict stuff to go through. When you take a sample and it's actually watered down. I don't know if it's with water, but they add certain fluids to it to thin it out. And one one ejaculate could create several hundred straws.
Yeah.
Okay, so judging from what I witnessed the other day, the bull delivered well over a pint.
Good lad.
Well, his testicles are about the size of a junior rugby ball.
Yeah.
So, and I have to check them regularly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that then requires cryogenic facilities to. When you've got them in the straws, they have to, within minutes, they've got to be deep frozen in liquid nitrogen, and then they get handled by a special carrier service that only deals with semen straws from all different animals. And then there's an international trade, and so they go from one person's cryogenic chamber to the carrier's cryogenic chamber. They're carried over in an aircraft via another type of cryogenic chamber. They get delivered into the carrier's country-based cryogenic chambers. Obviously, they're collecting various samples from different registered AI suppliers, and then from there, if I've ordered some, they'll go to my AI service into their cryogenic chamber, and they'll then put one of the straws into a vehicle cryogenic chamber. They literally, when you take it out of the vehicle cryogenic chamber, it must be delivered to its target point within 3 or 4 minutes. Wow. Otherwise it's useless. Yeah. So no, you can't just quickly shall we say, extract a sample and then deliver it via syringe. Yeah. You go, well, I suppose you could deliver it by syringe.
Royal Mail it to.
Yeah, it just wouldn't work. No.
Wow.
It's like wow. So yes, I don't deal with that. I may make use of AI this year if I'd sold my bull, but I haven't sold my bull, and next year I've made arrangements for one that I missed out on some AI straws from a bull that is based in Canada. That's the joy of AI, because you can literally cherry pick your bull from around the world.
Wow.
The Americans' registration system and pedigree system for belted Galloways is a lot more lax, and what the Canadian one is as strict as the UK one. So there was one called Du Rapide Sherwood, which I thought was stunning, and I missed out on the last straws by about a week. But the person who did get some has had a bull that now somebody has bought, and that somebody came to view my animals when I had them up for sale over last weekend, and we've come to an arrangement where I'm going to borrow that bull next year to serve my cows, because they don't need him until June. They calve at a slightly different time to me. And so yeah,
that worked out in the end.
Yes, but we seem to have digressed from the original question, that being 60 years old, I've completely forgotten what the question was.
What was the question?
It was something, you said something about AI, and we spoke about the broken leg, and
it was about how to ride a bull.
How to train your bull, that was it.
How to train your bull, yeah.
So, okay, so
that's all right. It doesn't matter.
No, yes, we'll get there in the end. So the best thing to do to train a bull, and although I can do this with bulls I've bought in, as I did with King Leon. So let's start with a bought-in bull. A bought-in bull will mistrust everyone and everything other than the cows. They will try and assert their dominance over all the cows, and because they're in the position, obviously there's no competition bull with them, but they'll have a sniff around everybody and make sure that all the cows and steers know that that bull is top bovine in the barn or in the field, and they're happy with them. But anything strange, different people, stuff like that, they will be very wary of. They won't trust. They'll back away from. But the one thing that all animals, especially cattle, will not do is they won't back away from their food. So when it's feed time, I will make sure that in this case the bull will be in a separate pen from the cows, because if I don't want him to serve the cows until a certain time, so I don't want the bull to serve the cows before April. So if he's in the barn with them, he'll be in a separate pen. He'll get fed separately. So I can feed all the cows, feed him, and then I will literally just reach out and touch his head. Now, for the first few days, that bull will back off. Eventually, they'll realize that nothing happens when I touch their head, and they'll stay put. And I'll gradually get closer, maybe 2 hands, then I'll stroke their neck, and each time they back away, they will always return to the feed. So I'll just stay there, and I'll keep touching their neck and touching their head. Eventually, I will climb over the feeder rail onto their side. This is where you have to check their reaction and be willing to jump back again very quickly. So I will then do exactly the same thing, but on their side of the fence. And over the next few days, I will put an arm over their shoulders. I will brush them, give them a sense of well-being. I will feel along their flank, across their legs, to make sure that I can tell if they kick out, that it's not safe to progress. They need to be able to trust me to run my hand along each of their legs and at their tail. And then I'll start putting weight on. I'll put a leg over their shoulders, and then I'll start putting more and more weight on. And then I'll put, my whole body will go over, as in I will sit on them as if it's so their neck is between my legs, or their shoulders are, but my toes will be on the feeder rail. So if they back out, they'll back out from underneath me as well. And gradually I'll put more and more weight on them while they're eating, and they won't move. And then eventually they will. What I'll do the day that they do move is I will spread the food out along the trough, so they have to back out of one space in the feeder rail and go in another, and that's where I'll stay on board. If they've backed out and they don't want me, I'm at a position where I can reach out to one side and grab hold of a hurdle. I can dismount and be out of harm's way. If they're not bothered about me being there, they will back out of one, walk along 2 or 3 feet, and then put their head through the next space to get to the feed, because there's no competition. They're in a pen on their own. I don't say pen on their own. They can interact with all the cows. It's the big heavy gauge steel hurdles. They can see through. They can sniff each other. Quite often the cows present themselves, shall we say, to the bull and wiggle their bums on the hurdle, which I do have a very bent hurdle where a bull decided he was going to have a go and did manage to get over. And I did have to push him back into his own pen, but and dig out a lot of the stuff that had built up, which gave him a height advantage over the hurdle. So yes, that's how you can do it with an established bull that's coming new to the herd. So when King Leon came to me, it took me 3 weeks. He'd never even been in a halter before, and it took me 3 weeks, and he was taking me for plods around his section of the barn. He was throwing his head around left and right to say, what is this on my back? But he wasn't making, he knew it was me, and he was just challenging as to what was I doing there. He wasn't uncomfortable. And I dismounted within 30 seconds. I wasn't going to prolong it. I'm not into, I think they refer to it as breaking a horse or breaking a bull. To me, I don't want to break them. I want them to voluntarily come up to me and say, oh, I want to do that again. So with one that you've got as a calf, it's much easier. It's still a lot of work, and you've got to be patient, because that calf is not going to be able to support my weight for a couple of years, not properly. It's even easier if they see you doing it with another one. So with Normski, he saw me interacting with Kevin and Harry, 2 previous bulls, and they will actively think, oh, I want to do that, and he would constantly pushing his nose between my leg and the side of the bull, as if to say, come on, get onto my back. And so that's when I started spending more time with him and doing it that way. But you always, from the time they're born, you need to get them familiar with you being in a position of over their back. So as they grow up, I still straddle them, although I'm not putting any weight on them. I might literally touch my backside on their back while I'm giving them a bottle or giving them some little sweeties. So they get very familiar to it. And you can introduce the rope halter because they trust you and they don't know what it is. And you can just gradually sort of give them a little bit of a pull on the halter and encourage them to come along, and they understand what it is then. And I built myself a bridle out of rope, which self-adjusts. So it's had very long reins, made out of super soft cotton rope. It's based on the same principles as a halter, but instead of a one loose end, it went all the way around. So as the bull's head was growing, so the reins would get shorter. But even though I thought I had plenty of rope, when I put it on King Leon, the reins were so small, I couldn't reach them. His massive head, and literally the reins were halfway down his neck. There was no way that I could reach down and get them. So we don't use the bridle on King Leon. Neither do I use a saddle on King Leon. Normsky, however,
sounds massive.
He is. He's a fairly big boy. But Normsky, when he was 6 months old, my grandson, who is now 9, so when he was 6, we took him to a saddlery in the over near Ipswich, and I did phone them up first, say, look, I need to bring my animal in for a fitting. And they said, okay. I said, I'd like to buy a saddle, just a second-hand one, preferably treeless, because it's got a very broad back. And I turned up with a calf in a livestock trailer, and they got very excited. And so even though little Charlie had been sat on Normsky, because he's obviously at 6 years old, he's light as a feather. Of course, a 6-month-old calf. I've seen a 6-month-old calf pick up a 100-weight hurdle on its shoulders and force them forwards by several feet, connected to other hurdles. So they're very strong even at a young age. But not strong enough to take me for a ride per se, but they could certainly give me a difficult time if they wanted to. But little Charlie, he was on that back, and Normsky was fitted with a saddle, didn't wobble, didn't challenge at all, and we walked Normsky round with Charlie on his back when he was 6 months old, and he's just sought human attention ever since.
That's so incredible. He's so nice.
I did get told off by other cattle farmers, though, because they think it's incredibly irresponsible. But I think it's just that they haven't built up the same relationship with their animals. And if they're on a commercial scale, they won't have time to. They might do if they've got one or two that they can spend special time with. But then those animals will spend far more time with the ones that he doesn't, and they'll pick up on their feelings as well. So I can understand their point of view when farmed in their numbers, but the numbers I have, I can spend time with every single one of them.
And do you think maybe they want to keep like a bit of separation between them and the animals as well, because they know the animal's destiny is to, eventually end up at a butcher's?
Yes, in fact, there was a farming person not too far away from me who is also a beef farmer. He was round for dinner with his wife, and he said to me, I do not understand how you could eat them after you raise them so much. I said, no, don't you? No, he said, I love them too much. He would actually sell his raised beef. He'll sell that off to whoever's buying it through the abattoir or the supermarkets, and then he'll go to the supermarket or the butcher, and he will buy beef from the supermarket because he's disassociated with it. And I eat it because I love it. Every animal, whether they're destined for the freezer or whether they're destined for breeding, will still have the same interaction with me. I don't differentiate between them when they're growing up, except that as a general rule, not a perfect rule, because there are some exceptions from maybe a late change of decision as to what an animal, say, I thought, say, Oliver was going to be a bull, but then his conformity didn't meet the very high expectations that I was expecting, so I castrated him. But I had him castrated. I didn't do it myself. By the time they're a year old, it needs surgical intervention. So he'd still been named. So he's still called Oliver, and he'll go off in July this year and he'll be a food. But normally, as a general rule, anything that's destined for the freezer is named after a food. So our current freezer one, which is actually owned by a local plumber now, is called Onions. And then there's, and we've had Cheeseburger, we've had Doomed, because I couldn't think of anything beginning with D. We had Big Mac when we were on B's, and so on and so forth through the letters. We've got one that we won't be keeping, and it's a bit cheeky because we're on Q this year. We've named him Corn.
Yeah.
And we asked my vegetarian granddaughter as to whether or not that constituted vegetarian if we roasted corn. And there's another one that's I can't remember the other name of the other one now. It's not Pop-Ups, but Pop-Ups was I named him before. It was named after me, and then I realised he had a white foot, but the name had stuck, and I didn't know if there was going to be another boy born that we were going to be able to keep. So Pop-Ups stayed as Pop-Ups. So be it.
So that's really good news that you mentioned before. Was it 30 or 33,000 acres? Did you say, or
no, 30 acres? 33,000 acres would be an enormous amount of space, yeah. And I don't think 15 cows would be able to do it justice.
Okay, yeah. So 30 acres then. So how did you come about that? Did somebody saw your article?
Phoned me up.
Nice.
I noted, well, they'd seen the article, but when I first started here, I used to buy my straw from this person, and because we didn't have a barn, we just had field shelters that were needing straw, and he would deliver 1 or 2 bales at a time. These big Heston bales, they'd fit on his pickup, and he'd drive over from the next village, and he'd drop them off, and then we'd retie them. We'd cut them open, halve their size, and retie them with lorryman's hitches. You learn a lot when you start off farming. The learning curve is quite steep. And then when we were building the barn, he rented me his telehandler so that I could put the steelwork up for the barn. And then he saw me, and I saw the thing in the EB, and he phoned me up and said, Julian, said, I understand you're after some grazing. And I said, yes. He said, well, can you make use of 30 acres? Yes. Cancel the sale. There is a bit of a disadvantage, and I'm not going to say where it is, but there isn't any, there's no property overlooking it. So there's a danger that the nomarchs of the world might decide that they want to go and collect them as it's a risk of rustling, which unfortunately is increasing more and more these days. And my existing grazing and another 10 acres that has been offered to me does have, it's overseen by the property that it's attached to, and is a less risk.
Are you perhaps able to tag them with some sort of chip that you can watch using a bit of software? No.
You imagine that it would be extremely expensive. I mean, some of the equipment that I have has tracking devices on it, and you can get them now so small that at one point, when the grandchildren were small, we had them sewn into their coats, so that when they went out and about, we knew where they were. But you just change the batteries every 6 months. But that was based on a different technology to an ordinary tracker. Now, a tracker, you need a SIM card, and the cheapest one, what they call 1P Mobile, is 30 quid a year for real-time tracking, and then you've got the battery to support it. They'd be wearing big collars, and of course the first thing someone's going to do is take an angle grinder and cut the collar off, which will bring me to another subject soon enough about ear tags. But no, the only thing you can do is watch out constantly, have friends looking, have people that I've got one field that backs onto half a dozen bungalows, and anybody that they don't know that's in there with the animals, I get a phone call and I'm down there. More often than not, it's just somebody that I do know, maybe a new person that's moved into one of the bungalows and hasn't met everybody yet. Somebody or rather has gone with a dog. I need to get them out fairly pronto. but there's other people. I befriend most of the people attached to, I say most, not all, attached to the fields, because their eyes are essential to me.
Yeah.
So yes, but I mentioned about the ear tags.
Yeah.
And I was looking up about the red tractor, what they call farm assurance. And it's supposed to be
Yeah.
able to go into a supermarket. We won't pick any brand because it's common amongst all of them. This farm to fork traceability. It's a bit of a nonsense. If you take a pack of mints up to the customer service counter at Tesco's and say, "I'd like to know which farm this particular animal came from," they may well make an excuse and tell you that they can't do that at this point. It's only done at a previous stage. Well, remember, it's supposed to be traceability right the way through to the fork, not when it's in the wholesale department of the supermarket. But it all boils down to, and it's incredible amount of costs. So I've got, it cost me £5 for a set of ear tags for a bovine. But that does for me include a BVD test. Which is a disease that can be carried. It's a sexually transmitted disease for cows, and it can make them infertile. So every calf is issued, for me, I apply these ear tags. It takes a tissue sample, it gets sent off, it gets tested, and therefore I can sell my calves as BVD tested negative. But ignoring the testing side of things, whether it be a sheep or a cow or any other livestock, maybe not a pig, I suppose, but the pig's heads do stay on a bit longer. But when a cow is killed at an abattoir, the two next things that happen to it are it gets eviscerated and it gets skinned and decapitated. I'm not quite sure which sequence that goes in. So those that say, "Oh yes, but they use a bolus chip," well, that went out when they eviscerated them, and of course the ear tag came off when they took the head off. Now you've got basically a carcass, an empty carcass with no identification marks on it. And it literally comes down to the honesty of the person on the abattoir line filling in a piece of paper and sticking it in the right carcass on a pin.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's a pin on a bit of paper. It's a piece of paper on a pin stuck into the carcass. And if you've got a, shall we say, a dodgy abattoir where the staff are allowed significant discounts on the beef, they can think, "Oh, that's a nice carcass," and they can switch the tags between a grotty piece of beef and a good piece of beef, whether it be mine or somebody else's, and then I would get back the grotty piece of beef that I've had one before. One of the other reasons I use these tags is that if I know it's going in the food chain, I keep that ear tag sample, because it's an irrefutable tissue sample from the ear tag of that animal, and I keep it in the freezer. And the abattoir concerned has closed down since, and I don't have any dealings with it. But yeah, it's one of those things. It's that traceability is only as good as the honesty of the people along the food chain. So.
What happened with the a few years ago? There was sort of a small outrage about horse meat getting into the food chain, which, like, for me, I mean, I didn't really see too much of a problem with it, but I'm just a consumer where, like, I've been to Europe and they serve horse on the menu in a lot of different places. So I was just like, well, one meat is as good as another to me. But obviously there's all sorts of different issues there. If that meat is getting into the food chain, it's because somebody's not doing their job properly, or they're trying to scam somebody. So do you know what happened there, or have you got any insights?
I can only make from my own observations of the food chain and where opportunity would strike. First of all, just to be clear, in France especially, when you order steak, by default, it is horse steak. You have to order beef steak to get beef steak. In Italy, they sell donkey meat, but it is clearly menued as donkey steak. Okay, the Italians are like us. They make sure that their menus are very clearly signed. With the French, it's knowledge, local knowledge and experience. But steak by default is horse steak in France, and you have to ask for beef steak. With this traceability, remember the ear tag system that the UK uses today is the same European level. It's a trans-European standard of identification, and as a consequence, exactly the same opportunities exist. So if you're at an abattoir and you've got a piece of meat and you've got someone with a horse, that you can literally say, okay, well, I've got that carcass, and that's animal 1, 2, 3, 4, and the horse, well, the horse can not necessarily need to have, and now they've got passports, it's a little bit more difficult, but lots of people have got unregistered horses. They don't tend to, but so they go into the food chain. What happens is they just get passed off as another. By the time it's all butchered up or put through the mincer, it's just that was that animal, that 1, 2, 3, 4. That was a cow.
Yeah.
There's plenty of opportunity, and the more we fracture the production process in mass production of food, especially pre-made meals, literally they'll buy the meat in from one country, they'll buy vegetables in from another country, and it'll all come together and be made in bulk and then get shipped off to another country to be packed. I mean, literally, it's crazy the amount of mileage that food has these days in the pre-prepared foods. But that's the opportunity, is the fact that there is no traceability that is infallible. The people that are going to do wrong will always do wrong, and the ones that will always do right will always end up with the costs, because I now have to double tag a sheep. Now, okay, I can understand that if one ear tag is missing, then you've got one that says, oh, that's sheep number 3456. Fine, okay, new tag 3456. Can I have another tag, please? Yes, and they post you a replacement tag. You apply that tag, and the good thing about a replacement tag is, if you've got a good relationship with your animals, is you can put that ear tag through the same hole, just as a human might change an earring. It's just goes click into place with a device that applies it, and then sorry, I suddenly lost my train of thought.
You were double tagging sheep.
Double tagging sheep, yes. But that doesn't really help me out as to what
we were talking about horse getting into the food chain.
Horse getting into, right? Yeah. Yes. So if you're the European standard. So like I explained earlier, if you've got a system where you're decapitating and eviscerating an animal in the abattoir, it's down to the honesty of the abattoir to put the pin, to write on the label and put a pin in it and process it as a single carcass dedicated to that number. Of course, you've then got opportunity, if they're dealing with multiple animals, some of whom might not be registered, of literally adding the body weight. You don't need too much. You wouldn't put all of a horse onto one carcass. You'd say, okay, well, we've got 50 carcasses or 20 carcasses of beef. We can hide the weight of one horse amongst 50 carcasses of beef. And that's how you can introduce beef meat into a ground meat situation.
Yeah. Yeah, it came and went very quickly, that sort of scandal, didn't it? It was
it did, but the situation hasn't changed. It's still down to the honesty of the individuals in the food chain. I thought what it was. We were talking about the red tractor earlier on.
Yeah.
Well, someone quite looking online, the comments about it is that there is nothing that is required by the red tractor standard that is not a legal obligation for every UK farmer. Only now the farmers have to pay somebody else, a third party, to come in and inspect and make sure that they're compliant with the law in order to get this red tractor status. It's okay. So how about you and I? Why don't we get inspected by another person that we have to spend hundreds of pounds on every year getting an inspection to make sure we're not breaking the law?
which
we don't.
Yeah.
You have people who are wandering around who see something happening, they'll investigate and they'll make arrests. An arrest is not a part of wrongdoing. An arrest is an opportunity that gives the police to investigate properly. It's often misunderstood. It's not a declaration of guilt. It is, okay, you're of interest. We need to arrest you, need to talk to you, gives them certain rights to investigate further and have access to all the information they might need. But why is it that farmers in this country have to go through that in order to get farm assured? And as one cereal farmer said, he couldn't sell his non-farm assured wheat into a UK buyer, but that same UK buyer was buying foreign wheat and putting it in the same silo with his farm assured wheat. So it's just simply not fair. We've got laws now that allow the importation of food which would be illegal to be raised in that manner in this country. So especially with the the cost of living going up, there will be lots of families who do struggle, and I fully appreciate that. I'm in a very privileged position having meat on my doorstep and a job that pays me well, that I don't have to worry about those circumstances. I still effing blind at the price of electricity that I have to pay. I don't have to worry about the water bill because I have a borehole, but that, of course, that is extracted from the ground by an electric pump, so I do pay for it still in part. But with the cost of living going up, then consumers will be looking to save money, and they will buy the lower priced cuts of meat, not just cuts of meat, but sources of meat. Now that's going to include food like beef from the United States, that is what they term feedlot beef. Tens of thousands of cows penned in corrals 100 meters by 100 meters, just say, and they don't have grass. They are fed a concentrated thing of corn and other high protein feeds that is cheap for the states because it's on their doorstep. They've got millions of acres of wheat, and they can feed that directly to the animals, and they don't really have a natural existence. It would be illegal for a farmer to farm like that in this country, but we allow the importation of that feed or that meat here to compete with us in the same way that foot and mouth disease is endemic in South America. But over here, if we get foot and mouth, the country's locked down. We can only sell to one abattoir, who of course then slashes the price of beef, so that because they take advantage of it. But they increase the price of beef because of the foot and mouth. We can't get the beef. But the reason why you can't get enough beef going through is because, strange enough, you're not paying the farmer the cost of it. But we allow Argentinian beef to come over, and their traceability is nothing like ours. It literally can be a handwritten number on an ear tag, which you can wipe off and write a different number on. So without wanting to name names or anything, little Jose could, I'm told that we don't buy from foot and mouth areas. It'd be like saying, well, we don't buy from farms in Berkshire because Berkshire's got a case of foot and mouth, but we'll buy from Buckinghamshire next door because that hasn't. Well, Jose in the Argentinian equivalent of Berkshire could just drive his cows over to Pedro, his cousin, who lives in the Buckingham equivalent of Argentina, and sell his animals through his brother, because there's no interruption on trade between farmers within Argentina. They can just, okay, well, we'll sell it to Pedro first and then sell it on.
And there's a huge trend as well in sort of Brazilian and Argentinian and South American steakhouses now popping up all over the place. In the UK.
These tomahawk steaks, as they call them, which is basically a very long rib with a bit of meat at the end. It's just, you might just as well buy a piece of tenderloin, because that's the only difference, is that you've got they're allowed to mature their beef on the bone, which we can do over here as long as the animal is under 30 months when it goes to slaughter. It's a remnant of the BSE days. But all of the animals that had BSE and the parents of them and the young ones that had BSE, they're long since dead.
Yeah,
they're on the next generation or 2 or 3 generations down. And if a feed animal goes through at the age of 30 months, and even if its mother gave birth for 15 years, which doesn't happen on a commercial scale. On a commercial beef farm, they're lucky if that cow will stay with the herd for more than 7 or 8 years. So those animals have long since gone through the food chain, and yet we're still tied to the BSE rules in the UK for 30 months.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a funny old industry, isn't it?
It can be, yes.
Did you manage to catch any of Clarkson's farm? Did you see Jeremy Clarkson on Amazon?
Yes, and I had to admit, most of that has to have been scripted, because there is no way someone with that acreage, even someone as busy as Jeremy Clarkson had been, he would have been forking out heavy cash to contractors to do the farming for him. It's not uncommon. A lot of farmers exclusively use contractors, and they wear gentleman's tweed, and they go, oh, and they rarely get their hands dirty. And there are some who do half and half. They make use of contractors with their big machines. But there is no way he would not know that he needed a fleet of tractors and trailers to fetch that wheat in and somewhere to store it. So a lot of it has just been for the cameras. And a shepherdess, how many sheep did he have?
Not many.
Paying a full-time shepherdess, even on minimum wage, he'd have eaten through the entire profits of his sheep within, I don't know, 2 months.
Yeah,
less maybe.
So how would you rate him as far as farmers goes?
Oh, it's unfair to ask the question. The character he presented on on Clarkson's is not necessarily the character that he actually is. He's obviously very canny. He has different morals than I do. I mean, the guy charges £6 for an empty milk bottle, which has cow juice written on the side, and then an extra £2 to fill it up with milk, which you pay. He probably paid 47 pence for to the farmer down the road for the milk, so it's not even his milk. And it goes into a machine, and people put their money in, and they press a button, and it fills the bottle up, and they take home a bottle of cow juice. He's certainly got his commercial head on, and is making every possible use of his celebrity in charging the sorts of rates he does. And things like that big lambing shed, supposedly a lambing shed that he got consent for right next to his shop. Well, at the moment, it's used for a waiting room for those people queuing up to get into his shop. Hardly agricultural use.
Yeah, it was a good show. It was entertaining.
It was entertaining, yes. And where he got a Lamborghini tractor, he claims he only paid 40 grand for. Well, I'd love to see whoever his second-hand dealer was, and it was second-hand, and I know it came from Germany. And okay, the instructions or the labels on it were in German, and it's got a slightly different thing on the back than our UK 3-point hitch and stuff. But a tractor that big with that number of hours on, which was not many, you'd have been looking at well into the 70 or 80,000 pound mark over here. To buy that. I mean, I've got a tractor. It's not a tractor. It's a telehandler at one end and a tractor at the other end that I've got on order, because I'm switching a lot of my IT consultancy. As I get older, I'm getting more bored seeing the same mistakes happening in my clients that I saw when I started 20 odd years ago. So I'm going to increase my agricultural contracting side of things and get more involved. So I'm looking at paying close to £100,000 for that new machine.
my running costs on it will be relatively low because I won't have lots of repairs to do unless I'm an idiot and drive it like a moron. But I've done the second-hand market. My 1986 John Deere tractor I bought for 7,000 quid, I can sell for £5,500, £6,000, but it's cost me thousands and thousands of pounds having the front axle rebuilt because something went wrong and a bolt came loose, and you can't buy the axles. So even if I could, it would have been far more than the value of the tractor. But a friend of mine who's a fabricator managed to re-engineer the axle by basically drilling a big hole to drill out all the damaged parts, welding in a big steel lump, and then milling out the steel lump to be exactly as it was before it got damaged. And that cost me about 1,300 quid. Then new pins for the loader. Tractors were never really designed to have a front loader and lift things, so these bushes and pins, they all had to be done. That was another 600 quid. And it just stacks up time and time again. I'm never going to get back with the amount of throughput I have with cattle. I'm never going to get back that sort of money on old equipment, but using new equipment and finding a niche that I can fulfill is something I can take advantage of. And when I get bored, I can sell that equipment well maintained for, with the way prices are going up at the moment, I probably won't lose very much at all on the second-hand price of that machine. Yeah, it should go for almost as much as I pay for it today. I should get back in 4 or 5 years' time, because in 4 or 5 years' time, that same machine will be £150,000 more.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Well, Julian, I think we've done it. What do you think?
Oh, that's fine. Yes, I think we maybe lost track of you.
Yeah.
Went weaving around. Like Jeremy Clarkson's tractor driving.
Yeah, that's the nature of this format. Like, there's no restrictions. You just go wherever the conversation takes you. It's beautiful. That's what I love about it the most.
Good.
Yes. But yeah, Julian, thank you so much for everything tonight. And when I get it uploaded and everything, I'll send you all the links. And
okay.
if you have any marketing material or any contact information that you're happy for me to share, I'll put it on the.
Well, I don't do that.
Yeah.
Side of it. So the people who come to visit the cows it's done by people contact me and they ask. Mostly it's been the locals, because I might write a column in the local Facebook group for that village. There's a village down the road from me that I'm part of. It's a Home Hale village. Has its own newsletter that goes out to every single property every month. Well, since COVID, that's been out of publication. It's coming back, and they came and actually did an article before the EDP did, but it doesn't come out just yet. So people sort of say, "Oh, can I come along?" Or they see me at a fete that I'm supporting with taking animals free of charge, letting people interact with it on an open day. So I don't really have a farm shop. I sell, my beef gets sold by the minimum is a half beast, the left or the right half. So it's not anything that needs promoting. Maybe if we have another one of these, when I go, "Oh, I've got a new combine harvester," then I could do with a little promotion for the contracting side of things.
Yeah.
But with the animals, it's I don't do it for profit, which is a good thing. I do it because of the lifestyle choice and the bond I can have with those animals and the trust. It's like nothing. I mean, I even did it with a crow a couple of years back. I found a crow chick that I kept an eye on. It had been definitely abandoned. Parents weren't coming to it. It was tipping down with rain. It would have died. So I rescued it, brought it up, fed it on cat food, mealworms and stuff. And I released it back into the wild, and it would fly into my office through the open window. My window opens outwards, so it would poop down the inside of my office glass. But I gave it a couple of leg rings so I could tell whether or not it was they all look alike. They're all crows. But she would, I called her Cheryl, as in Cheryl Crow.
Yeah, nice.
And she would come down and she would take a free ride on my hat.
and I'll send you that picture to include if you like. And she disliked the postman though, Nathan. He'd come down, she'd recognise his van, she'd fly in from several hundred metres away across the road, which a lovely house over there, and tall trees, and there's a murder of crows in those trees that she became part of. But she'd recognise the red van, and she'd come down, land on it, squawk at him as if to say, "What are you doing here?"
That's so funny. She was like your guard dog.
Yeah, but when I had a beard back then, and then my wife persuaded me that I should shave it off. And literally the day I shaved it off, I saw her one more time. I think, like I picked her up. She saw that I didn't have a beard, and she flew off, and she never came back.
Oh.
I keep an eye open for her.
Yeah.
I keep hoping that one that's a bit closer than all the rest must be her, and the leg rings have come off.
Yeah.
But some friends of mine who have a lot of fallen crows, crow chicks, are keeping an eye out this spring, and hopefully I'll raise several, and they can be part of my life here.
Yeah, part of the menagerie of.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It will be what it is.
Yeah, that's awesome. And thank you so much for your time, Julian. And it's been absolutely wonderful listening to your stories about the cows and the bulls and your lifestyle. And it's been amazing. Totally different for the podcast. And
I'm sorry to those people who thought I was rambling on, but it's just one of those things.
No,
you get
not
stuck in a particular train of thought, and then I completely forget what it was I started to say, and the subject gets changed completely. But if people phone back and phone in and say, "You never mentioned that thing, and you started talking about that, and we never got to hear about it," I'll happily come back and do a follow-up.
Yeah, nice, nice.
So long as you keep prompting me as to what the damn question was in the first place.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
I've got a video from earlier on, but I need to edit out some dead space at the front, and it's on a OneDrive, so I'll just send you a link to that. You can download it.
Lovely. Beautiful. Yeah, and I'll put it all together and I'll get it all uploaded. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for everything. And have a lovely rest of the week. And definitely come back for another episode in the future.
Okay.
Cheers.
Take care. Cheers,
Thanks, buddy. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.